to say I'm not an attorney and I'm not trained in law, so don't take this as legal advice. And now that I've got all of my bases covered, here we go. So I have managed to write up, if you guys can see this, an IEP exemption guide. And what this does, I'm just going to kind of read through it, just like a boring professor would do with the syllabus at school. We all know that this law, the mandatory vaccination law, provided an exemption for children with IEPs. It's written right into the California Health and Safety Code. So for everybody watching, oh, go ahead.
Real quick, I'm sorry. Somebody asked, what exactly are IEPs?
That's a great question. That's the first thing I'm going to cover.
Okay.
An IEP is an individualized education plan. So it is a legal document and it's agreed upon by the IEP team. So if your child has been assessed by your school district for special education services, they will be found eligible or ineligible. If they're eligible, then you move to the IEP process. And the members of the IEP team, this is really important, include the parent. The parent is a part of that team. It also includes school district members, different experts to interpret the assessments, and so on. So that team gets together and they write that legal document called an IEP, and that is the coordination of the child's services and instruction, everything specific to those kids' needs. Now, everything contained in that document is covered under a federal law called IDEA, and that stands for the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. And that's also super important because that federal law guarantees that your child with an IEP has to be provided what we call a free and appropriate public education. And I'm going to call that FAPE from here on out.
Okay.
And that FAPE has to be provided in the least restrictive environment, the LRE. What does that mean? That means that if your child has an IEP, federal IDEA law mandates that they be educated to the maximum extent possible in a classroom with their non-disabled peers. So the only circumstance where they can be removed is where they are severely disabled to the point where you can't provide supplements and services in a gen ed classroom. Then they can be removed. And that is to encourage inclusion and to prevent segregation of disabled students.
Okay.
So how are children in California provided this exclusion for the law? So we've talked about IDEA. So when you have a federal law and a state law, like SB 277 that conflict, where this comes into play is the Constitution. It's called the Supremacy Clause. In Article 6, Clause 2, the Supremacy, I'm just going to read it to you, states, federal law must be followed when there is a conflict between state and federal law, except where the state grants more rights to the individual. So in this circumstance, the state is not granting your child more rights. They are making a more restrictive situation. So federal law, IDEA, supersedes California law here. Now, what gets interesting is most of the time when you go to register your child, you're talking to the registrar or a school nurse or somebody who doesn't have any experience in special ed law, and they have no idea that this law even exists. They've only been trained on immunization law, and that is what they are going to enforce with you right there. So in California, are there state laws that support this exemption also? Absolutely. The first one is within, I gotta skip ahead in my notes, guys, sorry. The California Health and Safety Code. So right where you see SB 277 and all the vaccine requirements, guess what? There's an exemption for your IEP kiddo written right in there.
Oh, okay.
And if anybody needs a copy of this guide that I've written, you can go ahead and email me at sb277educationaladvocate@gmail.com, and I will email this to you, and I can also help you with any problems you're having with your school. So back to the actual California Health and Safety Code. In that code, it reads, this section, meaning the section about vaccination requirements, does not prohibit a pupil who qualifies for an IEP pursuant to federal law, there's that word again, federal IDEA, from accessing any special education and related services required by their IEP. So sometimes you'll show this to the school and they'll say, oh, well, it says related services, so we can just send your kid to speech therapy and then you got to go home. Nope, related services is a specific legal term in federal law. And it relates to transportation, occupational therapy, and so on. The reason it's there is not to say just services in general and you leave. It's there because it's quoting federal legal term in IDEA. So there is also a boatload of case law guidance. So if you remember a while back when we attempted to create an injunction against SB 277 in San Diego, the judge came out of the Ninth Circuit Court and he said in his ruling, If children are covered by IDEA, they are exempt from vaccination. SB 277 provides 3 exemptions to the vaccination requirement at issue. And then he goes on to say 1 is for students who qualify for an individualized education plan, program, or IEP. So we have our own state law that provides case law guidance here, in addition to our own health and safety code. And then lastly, we kind of return back to the federal portion. So similar to when you have a vaccine injured child, you have to go to vaccine court. If you're in the special education arena and you need to go to court with a school district because you disagree with them, you go to a special court, and that's called the Office of Administrative Hearing. So last year, in 2017, we had a student out of Long Beach whose parents filed against the school district. This child was excluded based on his immunization status. The OAH, the Office of Administrative Hearing, just published that ruling in September of last year, and they said in their statement, HSC, that stands for Health and Safety Code, Subdivision H, the one I read to you earlier, requires a school district provide a child with special education and services pursuant to their IEP, even if they have not been vaccinated. So why is case law useful? Most school districts do want to dig in on certain issues, but when you can prove to them that there is a financial incentive not to pursue this particular issue, and case law comes into play here, they usually will drop this. It doesn't make a lot of sense to pursue an issue with a parent if they have already seen another court or another school system in their same district lose.
Right.
So that's very useful. So now I'll kind of get into, you've gone to the office, you've tried to register your child, and they've turned you away. What do? The first thing I would advise everybody to do is document. Get the person who's refusing you to write their name down, their title down, the refusal itself, and any law that backs it up. Okay, some of you may have already been refused and you're thinking, oh crap, I didn't get that done. Now what? You want to make this part of your student's educational record. So what I would recommend is that you email the person or the school with a summary of what happened to document that that actually occurred. The next thing that I would recommend doing, and some of our special ed parents will know this already, there is a form called prior written notice in the special education community. If a school system is trying to change your child's placement or change anything in their IEP, they can't do it without your prior parental permission. They should have held an IEP meeting and discussed that with you as a member of the IEP team. If they've done that and they are changing your placement, you need to ask them for PWN, prior written notice, and they will have to document what they are trying to change and send you that in a legal letter, legal form in the PWN. This isn't something schools like to do because then they have to explain why they're refusing, what factors they considered, and so on. So you've done all of that, school is still digging in, now what do? My suggestion would be find an advocate or find an attorney. And the tricky part here is that most advocates and attorneys are really well versed on special ed law, but not so well versed on California immunization law. So ask them questions. Make sure that they know both sides of the coin. If they don't, come over to me and I will try to help find somebody who can help you. Now, cost is not an issue for an advocate. I work pro bono, and there are free parent training centers in every county in California for parents of special needs children who need help. So I can give you guys the link to that as well.
Could you repeat your email address one more time?
Yeah, sure. Sorry, I'm not looking at the comments.
Okay.
It's SB277educationaladvocate@gmail.com.
I'll put that in the top of the header also. Just wanted people were asking.
Yeah. So another question I get a lot is, my child has a 504. Is that also excluded? A 504 is also a plan for children who have disabilities, but no, unfortunately not, because 504s are not covered by federal IDEA. Your child must have an IEP. If you have concerns that your child who has a 504, that their needs aren't being met at school, I would encourage you to write a letter to the school and ask them to assess your child for all suspected areas of disability. See if they are eligible for special education. Maybe you can get them an IEP. So we've talked about the school trying to change placement. What if you're in the IEP meeting and the school is presenting you with a new IEP document where they want to change your child's placement? Or they're trying to document that they're unvaccinated and it's against the law and you have to catch up. In California, we have kind of an interesting situation. You don't have to sign that IEP You don't have to sign it when you leave the meeting. You can take it with you. You can only consent, you can consent to certain parts if you want, but the most important thing you should do is note your dissent. If you're not giving your consent for something, if you're only signing a certain part, or if you disagree, make the school write that down and attach it to the back of the IEP. Now, if the school says to you, we want to document that your child isn't vaccinated and that you have to get them caught up, and we're going to write that right here in your IEP, not appropriate. Okay, the IEPs, let me find my documentation on here. IEP should be relevant to the educational benefit of the child, how the IEP will be implemented, and the child's age-appropriate activities around their IEP. It has nothing to do with their vaccination status. Now, there is an initial health form that a nurse might complete when they're doing an assessment on your child, and there is a space there for vaccination status. So they can list that, but we don't need to go beyond that. There's no space for vaccination statutes. So you can say, no, that's inappropriate, and then remind them, you already have all of this documented in their health record, so this is redundant and unnecessary. We don't need this here.
I love you for that. Okay.
Okay, so how can you educate your school on the Iep exemption clause? I have written a few letters, and we can kind of tweak them based on your school district. And we can put your header in there, your child's name in there, all of that information, and send it over to your school. Now, it's up to you whether you're comfortable sending that on your own or you'd like to use an advocate to do that. Gosh, what was the other thing that I was just going to say? Oh, it left me. Darn it.
Well,
shoot, yeah.
We'll revisit if we do.
Yeah, but in any case, so now we have tools for, holding the schools accountable for what they're doing. Oh, I remember what I was going to say. If you are an LA Unified, because I get this question a lot, LA Unified has a district memo that says they will not deny any student their services regardless of immunization status, but some of their school nurses don't seem to be up to par on this. So don't let it go. If your district tells you something or your school tells you something, your district may still have policy buried somewhere that says otherwise. So I can look that up for you, and we can dig through that.
Thank you.
So I know that was a ton of information.
It's awesome. No, we needed it out there. I know I've had so many people telling me, the school's making me get exemption, and my child has an IEP. I don't know what to do. Honestly, I don't know what to tell them. So thank you very much for kind of clearing the air on that. And if there's any forms or anything like that parents need, can they still email you, or is it?
Yes, please. And I will get off my phone after this and hop on my browser and actually type in my email address. And anybody who needs it, feel free to email me. I will send you this FAQ guide. I will send you letters that you can provide to your school to educate them as well.
I love it. Thank you so much for doing this. You're going to help a lot of parents today. I know we did a little bit earlier, but things happen. But thank you so much for coming on. Next time we'll try the phone. All right. Thank you, Shannon. Have a great day.
Bye. You too. Bye.
Okay, so we have some amazing information